What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video I'm going to be building the best value RTX 3070 system I can possibly put together. I'm going to run you through all the parts I chose and why, the build process step by step so you can follow along if you like, before booting this machine up to see exactly how it performs in loads, and I mean loads, of the most popular titles. Make sure to get subscribed if you aren't already though, but let's jump into it. Now, as always, I'm going to kick things off by installing the CPU, RAM and CPU cooler onto our motherboard today. Now, I've gone for a B550 board, and the reason for that is very simple. The new Ryzen 5000 chips don't support B450, so you're going to have to spend just a little bit more money today for that future proofing and future support. This specifically though is the Asus Tough Gaming B550 board. You can actually get this board in both Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi variants, depending on just how much you want to spend. Into the motherboard, I'm going to install this. It's the Ryzen 5 3600 Non-X. They aren't actually replacing this with Ryzen 5000, so this is still going to be a good chip to choose for the next kind of 6-12 months potentially, and it's also really affordably priced. As you'll see later in the benchmark section, it's not really going to bottleneck the 3070 either, especially at 1440p, which is always good news. We're going to line up the gold triangle on the bottom left of the CPU with the corresponding triangle on our motherboard. Drop it nice and gently into place and return the arm right back down. The next component to install in our motherboard today, if I can get into it, is the RAM. Now this is a 16GB kit of Teamgroup's T-Force Delta RGB, and with a 3600 MHz clock speed and a bit of RGB up top at a great price, you really can't go wrong. To install these, we're going to pull back the grey clips on the second and fourth DIMM slots and line up the notch on our memory with the corresponding notches on the DIMM slots. That's then going to slide really nicely into place, and with even pressure to each side of the DIMM, it's going to fasten down super duper easily. I'm next up going to install the CPU cooler today, and when it comes to budget builds, you've got a few options. You can stick with the free included AMD stock cooler. It's not going to throttle the CPU, so the CPU won't have to slow down, but it might not hit those really high 4.2 GHz boost clock speeds that are going to be a good bonus in today's build. So I've got this. It's the Aerocool Mirage 5. It looks cool as hell and also doesn't cost us too much money. Whoa! The design on this is actually really weird, but you can actually see all these heat pipes that run through the cooler. So while it's not that much bigger than an AMD stock cooler, it should be a lot more hefty. Even the most experienced PC builders will need to glance at the manual quickly, but what that reveals is that we need to use the included standoffs and pop them through these 4 holes on the rear of the backplate. That's going to clamp our cooler nicely into place. And we're then going to place these kind of U-shaped brackets onto the bottom of the cooler, just like so, before finally then going and screwing it through the backplate and into the motherboard today. Okie dokie, the motherboard assembly is now all nice and complete, which means it's time to move into the case. It is actually another component from Aerocool today, and it's one of their latest chassis called the Hive. Now, what really appealed to me about this chassis is that it's got mesh all up the front, a pretty minimal design, as well as 3 included fans, and the ones at the front are pretty large. That's going to make sure our system stays nice and cool today and has plenty of airflow on a budget. I'm going to first off remove the tempered glass side panel as well, another bonus of today's case. We're going to do the same for the rear panel as well. Now, inside the case, you're going to find this bag which contains all the screws and all the other stuff that we need to install our motherboard into place. And we're then just going to check that underneath our motherboard, where we've got our 8 motherboard holes, that we've got a corresponding standoff installed in the case. We're missing just a couple, and they need to go here, here, and here. All right then, I think that's looking actually pretty damn good. That brings us nicely on to the penultimate component before we install the graphics card today, which is the power supply. A little bit more boring, but a very essential component in any build. This is the Aerocool Aero Bronze 600 watt. This is going to be enough for today's build. Nvidia recommends sort of 650 total system power, but our CPU is not particularly intensive, so this is going to work really, really well. We're going to screw it through the back of the case in these 4 locations, just like so. I actually almost nearly forgot as well, we need to install our SSD super quickly, and to do this we're going to take out the drive cage from just to the left of our power supply today with these 2 screws, and that's just going to sit quite nicely on top of the hard drive cage today with 4 of the little screws that come included with your case. Specifically, this is the Kingston A400. It's a cheap and cheerful SATA SSD drive. It's not going to be as quick as an M.2 SSD, but it is pretty affordable and should avoid any bottlenecking in today's build, which is good enough for me. And then we're just going to screw the drive sled nicely back into place with these 2 screws at the bottom of the chassis. Now then, the very last step before we go and install our graphics card today is to make sure all of our cables and wires are nicely plugged up. So here goes nothing. First up is our HD audio connector, which goes to the bottom left of the motherboard, just like so. USB 2 looks similar, but is different, with a pin blocked out once again, and goes to the bottom middle of our motherboard today. Next up is a SATA data cable that goes into the motherboard into any of the 4 ports at the bottom, with the other end plugging into our drive. This cable comes included with the motherboard. We're also going to plug up our JFP1 or front panel connectors. These are the little fiddly ones that go from your I/O shield down into the motherboard. I've popped a diagram on your screen now to make this really easy to follow along with. If you get them the wrong way around, don't panic, don't worry, nothing will explode, the system just won't turn on. USB 3 is the last of the front panel cables today. That goes to the right hand side of this case and motherboard combo and plugs in just like so. It's notched, so do be careful. The final cables then to plug in are our power connectors. The 4+4 pin CPU power is first up, which runs to the top left of our motherboard through this hole in the case. The 24-pin motherboard power cable is really easy to install. That's the largest of any cable we're going to use today, and that goes to the right-hand side of the motherboard with, you guessed it, 24 pins. Finally then is a SATA power cable. This plugs up to your drive as well and gives it loads of power, loads of juice, and make sure we are off to the races. Right then, it's finally time now to install the graphics card today. This is the RTX 3070 from Nvidia, but you guys probably already know that. I know stock is still a little bit all over the place, so do bear with me, and yes, I will be doing some AMD builds soon, but my gut feeling is that the 3070 is still going to be a phenomenal card. It gives you all of the great Nvidia specific features like their RTX technologies, DLSS, Nvidia reflex and broadcast and all that good stuff, and also an insane level of performance. We're talking 2080 super levels of performance and well above in most instances for a card that has a retail price of about $500. I will link this though in the description below for the latest availability. I really do hope people can start getting their hands on these as we head towards Christmas and 2021. To install it, we're just going to line it up with the slot so we know which of the rear PCIe covers need removing. Once we've pushed back this grey clip on our PCIe slot, the card is then going to nicely slide on into place and, much like our RAM, secure down with a satisfying click sound. Make sure to screw it in a little something just like this before finally installing this little adapter, which converts the new 12-pin Nvidia standard to a normal 8-pin PCIe power cable. And then all that's really left to do is do a bit of cable management, whack those side panels on, maybe throw an RGB strip or 2 in there before actually booting this machine up to see exactly how it performs and how it looks when it's all powered up, which can only mean one thing: it's time to roll the montage. Okay then, now you've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up and the process of putting it together, let's take a dive and see exactly how it performs in some of the most popular titles. The first game today is Death Stranding. It's a really good test of DLSS performance on this RTX 3070. Here you're seeing an average of 157 frames per second, with the 90 and 99th percentile results of 151 and 146 respectively. GTA 5 is another really good example of just how well the 3070 performs. 1440p high settings sees an average of 112 with 90 and 99th percentile results of 95 and 86, meaning the game stayed basically above 86 frames per second at all times, above 95% pretty much all the time, with an average of 112. Control is another game which really tests DLSS and ray tracing as well. Here at 1440p medium settings, of course 2560 by 1440 is the prime 3070 resolution, you're looking 95, 87 and 76. Here the lower powered 3600 non-X CPU, it is having a little bit of a performance impact, but nothing too major. Apex Legends, the new season, what an absolute game I had. Here you're looking at 143 FPS on average, with 131 and 127 for those 90 and 99th percentile results. Didn't quite get the W, but really liking this new Season 7 of Apex Legends. Call of Duty's Warzone, of course, the free battle royale of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, performed really nicely. 122 FPS on average in the game's 1440p medium to high preset. No ray tracing is actually supported in the free battle royale mode, only the campaign, so nothing like that here. But with 90 and 99th percentile results of 104 and 89, it was a really buttery smooth gameplay experience. The benchmarking mode of Forza Horizon 4 is a pretty easy basic game to run, but you can compare it really easily against some of my other videos, linked in the playlist in the card section now. 1440p ultra settings sees 131 frames per second with 115 and 103 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. Overwatch is a personal favourite of mine and it's next up on today's list. 250 FPS on average with 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 217 and 188. That means the game was pretty much above 188 FPS basically all of the time, providing a smooth, playable, esports level gameplay experience. CSGO is a really easy game to run for any system and this machine is no exception. 341 FPS at 1440p high settings means you couldn't possibly want more FPS than that. It is an easy game to run, but you guys always want to see it, so here it is. Battlefield 5 is another game I tried out today. It does support ray tracing and DLSS. I opted to turn DLSS on, giving us a bit more frame rate through some snazzy AI render upscaling. But actually kept ray tracing off because it is a performance hitter in Battlefield 5 of all the ray tracing titles. Here you're looking at 121 FPS on average with 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 106 and 93. The Minecraft RTX beta is next up with 1440p ray tracing enabled and 8-chunk render distance, as anything more causes instability in the beta, as well as upscale and kind of high resolution textures, or DLSS for anybody wondering. You're looking 86 FPS on average with 71 and 45. This map is quite dark and as such is quite intense in terms of ray tracing, so your mileage may vary and may probably be a little bit better. I'd avoid the beta at the moment. It is a little bit buggy, it's a bit low on the frame rate side, but visually looks great. Doom Eternal is always a good game to test out. Here at 1440p Nightmare, what a settings name. You're looking at 164 FPS with 147 and 133 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. Ultra Nightmare is probably still going to be above 100 FPS, but for a more kind of esports style gaming experience, these are the settings you want to opt for. Rainbow Six Siege is a similar story. The game's inbuilt benchmarking modes provides kind of a repeatable, easily comparable result. Here at 1440p very high settings, you're looking 245, 238 and 220 FPS for the average 90 and 99th percentile results. Valorant is the penultimate game on my list today, a bit easier to run, granted, but still hugely popular. The CSGO-like mechanics also translate into the frame rate department with 273, 256 and 237 respectively. Finally then, the last game today, a bit of Fortnite. Save the best till last if you agree. Drop a comment down in the comment section below. Here you're looking 201 FPS on average with Nvidia Reflex and DLSS enabled but ray tracing turned off. You're then going to drop down to 188 and 180 for your 90 and 99th percentile results, but all in all a fantastic gaming experience. With that being said though, that not only wraps it up for the benchmarks today, but for the whole video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Get subscribed, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.